All right, it's official. We have started recording.
All right.
Beautiful.
So I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'm Ken Martin. I think today is my last official day of my presidency. But it's a great opportunity to use our guest speaker for today, our spotlight speaker, Sidney Griffin, who has been a really outstanding person here in Virginia, architect, serves at the University of Virginia as the VIM Project Manager, as you can see. He is also the AIA Central Virginia Vice President, President-elect. He is the BIM Project Manager for University of Facilities Management, sorry, and received both a BS in Architecture and a Master of Architecture from the University of Virginia.
That's right.
Yeah. So Sidney aspires to elevate UVA's excellence by harnessing the benefits of data and technology for the stewardship of UVA's built environment. And I'd just like to say I'm truly honored to introduce Sidney to our group and to the rest of the architectural environment here, and would ask that he just leave a few minutes at the end of your presentation for questions and answers. I'm sure there will be some. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Sidney.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Ian and Kelly, for inviting me to do this presentation. I was a little hesitant at first following Bert Pinnock, and then I said, what the heck? I have a story to tell, so let's tell the story. Let me get my screen sharing working here. I'm going to try something a little new. Let's see how this works. There we go. All right, I have to move over to the other side. Okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I am going to be just kind of giving you an overview of me. This is going to be a presentation of how I got to where I am, and hopefully there will be some tidbits of inspiration that will help you get to where you're going. Let me see, go to the next slide. So I was thinking about, when I put this all together, what I was going to talk about. And the first thing I think about when I think about a presentation is who the audience is. You'll probably learn as I talk about this. This is basically how I start to approach problem solving, this to meet the people where they are and provide them with the information that they need. So this presentation is going to be first for those up and coming future designers. And you'll probably hear me say architecture very little in this presentation, because I feel like the conversation here can be applied to any type of design. We need more people, more stories, more thoughts, more everything in the design world. So first, it's for those young and upcoming designers. The second audience is us veterans of design. Those of us that have been through the thick and thin. We've had feasts and famines. We had wins and heartbreaks. We have stories to tell. So we need to tell those stories so that those that are coming up after us can learn from them. This presentation is coming on the heels of an article that Sean Mulligan wrote. He's here today. He's our AIA Central Virginia president, and he based the article on an interview he did with me a few weeks ago, or a few months ago now, for the AIA Central Virginia Cornerstones Stories. What he's doing is an inspirational effort to shine light on the people in the industry that are working in the background to keep firms running smoothly. They don't get celebrated enough, and I appreciate Sean's efforts to make that change. If you haven't read that article, you can find it on the AIA Central Virginia website. It's aiacentralvirginia.org. Or you can also read it in the current issue of Inform magazine. Okay. So back at VMDO, when we had a new employee come in, there was a social gathering that we would have on Thursdays. And every once in a while, we would have a series called the You at VMDO series. And it was all about getting to know the person's backstory. So that's what this presentation is going to be about. But I'm not going to go with the full backstory of how I grew up in Chesterfield. I'm going to fast forward through that. Most of this is going to be, like I said, about how I approach work and how I like to work with people and solve their problems. I believe in the power of a good story, be that your story or my story, our history, and how that affects our now and tomorrow. So I hope by sharing my story with you, you will be a little more inspired to share yours. Okay, so you're going to get to know me through my journey to getting to where I am, and you'll learn about what I'm doing first. But yeah, let's just get started. So my occupation, I work over at that university that Jefferson designed down the road here. I'm in Charlottesville right now, and I recognize and am proud of the fact that that university was built with hands that look like mine. My title is BIM Project Manager, but honestly, I think that that is just an application of a business title that is being applied to something that's not fully understood. The reason I say that is because the BIM part of my title is just the foundation. I'm more of a design technologist that specializes in BIM, and the very fundamental role that I have is to solve problems. And the problem that I'm solving right now at UVA is trying to figure out how to harness the hordes of information that's in these BIM models that are getting delivered to us through design processes and construction processes, so that they can be leveraged in all sorts of business applications. Part of that work will require me to do some digging and studying of the structures that exist already on campus. And those structures, I recognize, were built by hands that look like mine. And I get to rebuild them in a virtual space so that future generations will have access to them and understand what was here for generations to come. All right, let's break down that acronym that is in front of my occupation. So BIM, let me move over a little bit, is known commonly as building information modeling, although in some areas we can call it building information management. The modeling side of it is looking at basically a virtual 3D model. It's the graphics that represent what is in the built world. These models are resources for instruction when you're looking at it in the construction realm, so that contractors and subcontractors and designers, all the stakeholders can understand better what is being constructed. And moving forward, it's a reference for what will be there. And in the role that I have, it's kind of a historic archivist role where I get to see also what was there. I get to model that and place that in space that it was in, and we get to experience campus in the way that it might have been before. These models are built out of various elements, and the beauty of BIM is that each of those elements can hold information. They are containers of information, and that information can be pushed and pulled in various ways into other programs, into other business applications. We can collect that information, we can sort it, we can analyze it. That information is very much fluid. The work that I'm doing now, I recognize, is the foundation of technology that we really have not even conceived of yet. So an example of that is, imagine now that we are in the era of augmented reality and virtual reality. Imagine being able to put on some VR goggles, don some VR gloves, and be able to touch a wall and have that wall tell you everything about it. That wall will be able to tell you its area, what's in it, its fire rating, when it was last painted, what color was it that was painted, who painted it, how much were they paid to paint it, who chose the paint color. All that information is there if you build it into the model, and you can extract it back out. It's a touch point of endless information, and that's just the foundation of future applications for all this information that we're pulling together. All right, so if you think about the timeline of a building, we are going to start with a design process that's going to last a couple of years. We're going to go through a construction process that's going to be a couple of years. But the life cycle of that building is 50 to 100 years. So designers and contractors are only taking up 10% of that lifespan of that building. Owners have it for the other 90%. So why aren't owners leveraging this more? Unfortunately, they have been the last to the table to figure out how to best leverage this treasure trove of goodness. So models up till now have just been filed away in folders and forgotten, really. So in the time that I've been at UVA, which is really full-time work, I've been there only about 4 months, but I had some part-time work before that. I've been working on dusting off these models and getting them updated and organized so that I can formulate standards to make plans for how they could be used in other areas in the university, such as, so far I've touched space management, asset management, zone maintenance. There was a project coordination effort that I had help with, and certainly capital planning. All of these are enhanced by the ability to experience what was designed in 3 dimensions and be able to manipulate it in 3D space. So how did I get here? Let's go through this a little bit. So back in high school, I dabbled a bit with computers. I did some basic programming and gaming. That was my Friday night fun, is to see what I can do with my 286 computer, break it and put it back together. I had, I was relatively advanced academically, and I liked art, I liked math, I liked sciences, but there really wasn't any direction. And I'm very proud with the way that the school systems today are starting to transform into a pipeline that actually understands what the child is capable of, nurtures those capabilities, and kind of puts them on a path to being citizens of society that can best use those tools that they have. I can probably say I did not have the ability to do that, but I had some general academic skills. So when it came to filling out college applications, that's when I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And unfortunately, I couldn't go the route of the starving artist as much as I wanted to. I could hear my mom saying, "I'm not going to have a starving artist in the house. How are you going to starve anyway? You like food too much." I can certainly hear her say that. So that was out. Engineering, maybe, but it was just so sterile. I couldn't really get past the stodginess of it. So architecture was the last on the list. Sure, but give it a try. So got into undergrad at UVA, School of Architecture, and I was a bit frustrated. I had a hard time understanding what I was supposed to understand, much because so little of it related to the world that I had come from. I didn't see role models. I didn't see myself reflected in the curriculum. Fortunately, I had a mentor. My first year, I was taking Mr. Vickery's Concepts in Architecture class, and it was the final project of the year. It was probably the first time I had to do an all-nighter, and that was really rough. And it got to be about 6 a.m. when I realized I was not going to finish. It was not going to get done. And I had a mentor at that time, my TA, fourth year. His name was Mila. I wish I had more information so I can look him up to thank him. But he was the steady rock that I could come to with my problems. And for this problem, I was like, I understand, you're my TA. I can't get this done. Can I get an extension? Well, I couldn't get the extension, but he said, turn in what you have. We'll see how it goes. And I passed the course. I'm here, of course, so I did well enough. But the part that really sticks in my mind is how he pulled me aside at the end of the class and told me directly to never give up. And that is what I would love to thank him for, is to say that I haven't given up and I'm still moving forward, and I'm thankful for that. Fast forward a few years, I've gotten into studios, and this is where I'm starting to understand more about what architecture is, how it applies to the work I'm doing. But realities of the world remained, and school is expensive. It's ridiculously expensive. Materials that we had to pull together for models and general drawing, the materials were expensive, and I treated them like precious commodities. I didn't want to touch it unless I knew exactly what I wanted to put on it. I used it slowly so that I didn't make mistakes. And for that reason, I didn't get a lot of work done. Also, to be able to afford those materials, I had to do work. I had to work during school. It was a reality of life. And fortunately, I got into UVA catering, which ironically was kind of one of those inspirational things in my architectural path, because I got to see the spaces at UVA that were most precious, and I got to see them in the best light right before an event. We would work like clockwork to get the rotunda at Dome Room to go from an everyday space to a dinner place for 100 seated dinner. And it was a magical transformation. And that was one of those things I really took pride in every time I had to do a job. But unfortunately, those jobs were late at night. And those late night dinners turned into me getting back to the studio to finish my studio work at 12 in the morning for something due the next day. So inevitably, the question came along from one of my professors. So why don't you have enough work? Where's all the work? Why is everyone else so much farther ahead than you? I was like, well, I had to work last night. I couldn't be here all night like everyone else. And the question of, so what's more important to you? Being able to work or go to school, or the schoolwork that you're doing? And there, I just knew that there was a difference in realities, that she wasn't understanding where I was. And it, like I've heard, it wasn't a safe space. So I battled through, got through undergrad, and I recognized that I was not going to keep momentum if I stopped work and came back to grad school. So went back to grad school right after undergrad, the very next year. At this point, I was on my own financially, so I kept working. I was still slow in my drawing. At that time though, I was taking classes with Earl Mark, learning microstation in 3 dimensions, and it was a game changer for me. I knew at that point I was faster on the computer than I was at hand drawing. So one Friday night, I was frustrated with my progress. I was the only one in the studio. I said, enough of this. I went home, packed up my 40-pound monitor into the car with my desktop, drove up to the school. Sigma Phi was partying, studio was empty. I was dragging my big monitor into the studio, dropped it on my drawing board, put everything together, and from then on, never looked back. I had a lot of resistance for taking the digital route in a very hand-drawn centric school, but I knew that this was the path that I was going to choose, and I just muscled my way through it. And again, I never looked back. So moving to the next step is coming to VMDO, and I appreciated VMDO's forward thinking and cutting edge mentality. They really embraced technology, and for that, they embraced my use of that technology. I brought 3D to the forefront for them using my microstation skills. But I also learned how to serve as an architect. I had many mentors, of course, along the way. Paul Lockerbie showed me the IT and CAD management ropes. Ken Thacker really helped me hone my documentation skills. Kim Smith, I have to really give it to her for teaching me how to be a good construction management manager. And before long, I could sit in any role in that office and be adequate, if not spectacular. So that's why on this slide, I was learning to be a unicorn, because there are not many in an office that can fulfill any role at any time. And I was willing to do any role at any time. So about halfway through that process, through that timeline at VMDO, BIM started to come online as the next big thing, about 2007, 2008. And VMDO says, okay, we'll try it. We tried it out on this small college prep school. It was in Southwest Virginia with me and another person on the production team. It was just the 2 of us. So here we are, just the two of us on the production team. We've got new software. We have no backup. Here, figure it out. And while you're at it, do a project. So without any background support there, it was a frustrating time, but I knew by the end of the project that BIM was the way forward for VMDO and the rest of the industry. And by pushing it sooner rather than later, not waiting, we were going to distinguish VMDO as a leader in the industry and better than the competition. So it was a bargaining chip. So after that project, it was successfully completed. Unfortunately, the project never got built because there was a funding problem. But the executive committee was weighing the pros and cons of switching over from CAD to BIM, which was a big undertaking. But I saw the writing on the wall. It had to happen. So I took a leap of faith and I wrote a letter to the partners saying, this is where we need to go. This is why we need to get there, and you will need a manager. And when that hiring process happens for that manager, I'm in. And it worked. They gave me the position of BIM manager. And for the following 2 to 3 years, I worked with my colleague, Bethany Pritchard, and we got VMDO out of CAD and into Revit in that time. So by 2013, I believe we could say that there were absolutely no projects that were being done in CAD. We were on 100% Revit. And at that time, there were still firms that were waiting to do the switch. Our consultants took a little bit longer to follow and get on board, but they soon realized that there were benefits to be gained by working with us in a 3D environment. We were bringing to them clash issues that they couldn't see in the 2D interface. So they quickly got on track as well. Contractors were already ahead of us, I think, or at least in step with architects. But at that point, BIM was a common language for the entire project team, except for the owner. The opportunity for me to make a change in that came when I got a message from an old undergrad friend who was giving up the role of BIM consultant for the UVA facilities management and wanted to recommend me for the job. It was an opportunity to change the course of BIM adoption for owners, and it would open up the doors for firms like VMDO to provide more services and to work more closely with great clients like UVA. So I couldn't pass it up, and that's where I am now. So some lessons learned. First and foremost, I would recommend to anyone following my footsteps is to have someone to look up to. And for those of us who have gone through it, be that person to look up to. I would say, don't be afraid to jump in without knowing what's going on, what's going to work out on the other side. You have to have some blind faith in yourself and jump in with both feet. I like to say that each of us has a story that affects the way we perceive the world, how the world perceives us, the way we think, the way we approach and solve problems. And we all need to bring that to the table every time in an honest and giving way. When someone does bring themselves to the table in that light, we as receivers need to embrace that offering as a treasure. There's value in every person's offering, even if we don't understand the perspective. And lastly, work with what you have. My wife and I, we watch a series of RV enthusiasts, and one of their mantras is to start small and start now. So to start somewhere. If your path is going in a direction that's not quite the standard path or the typical path, jump and move in that direction, because you would only have regrets not going that way. So what's next for me? I will continue to see how deep this rabbit hole goes for UVA and BIM. I would like for UVA to become the leader among colleges and universities in using BIM as a cornerstone of their business operations. Ideally, that would seep into the community and continue to be used by corporations and other companies. Two, I am definitely all aboard and being a mentor for the future. That includes working with AIA Central Virginia and Virginia NOMA and the efforts that they are pursuing to increase membership, increase awareness, increase diversity and inclusion. And that's where I am, and that's what I hope to inspire you all with. I hope there are some questions.
I have a question, I guess, to lead things off.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was it for you to progress? I'm on the AIA Virginia's JEDI committee, and we always talk about how individuals like yourself who have outstanding skills that they're eager and willing to share with the world, but sometimes, for lack of a better term, bogged down in office bureaucracy or whatever you want to call it, but are not able to progress. So did you find that to be an issue or a problem when you were coming up in the profession?
It's probably hard to say. I feel like there were times where maybe my own interpretation of the situation may have gotten in my own way. I don't feel like I can say I've ever felt any sort of discrimination in the workplace. But at the same time, it's hard for me to say if there was any opportunities that I got past because of my ethnicity or because of any lack of faith in my abilities. I would hope that that's not the case. But I will say it took me a very long time to get licensed. And I graduated from graduate school in 2001. It's typically a 3 to 5 year process. If you're really pushing it, it took me 13 years. So some of that was a lack of knowing what the steps are. Maybe if I had more of a mentorship to keep me moving forward, that would have kept me moving towards licensure earlier. But I also think that I was a great problem solver, and there was maybe some pigeonholing that had happened at that point. So once I veered into that path, there's no real need for you to keep pursuing that original path of licensure. So if anyone is thinking of taking the path that I have and still wants to maintain the original goal of licensure, be intentional about it.
So it looks like we have one question in the chat, and then also Rama has her hand raised. Rama, would you like to go ahead first?
Sure, I can do that. I think I kind of have two questions, one for education, one for career. You'd mentioned in your early student days, it was difficult to get professors on board with going in a digital route. And I know things have changed a little bit in that regard, with schools making more commitment to getting people ready for the profession at large, since so many people are going mainly digital. But what else do you think we could do to sort of promote that? Because I've heard a lot of people in the profession complaining that people are graduating without skills that they need in order to succeed in the office. But at the same time, architecture schools are going in a different direction.
You're saying that the architecture schools are going in the direction of going more digital and less manual?
Some of them are. They're investing more in those courses earlier. I remember when I went to Hampton, we did have Revit courses and SketchUp courses. They were kind of basic, like very entry level courses. And if you wanted to sort of get it at a more advanced level, you had to go and find that for yourself. Like that, how you can find certifications now online for like Revit for house design and stuff like that. It wasn't at that level. It was like, okay, lines, it was almost like trying to do basic AutoCAD basically, as opposed to, okay, here's how you put a whole model together in Lumion and figure out lighting and all those things. Not at that level.
I think architecture schools are in a tough spot right now. I do think that the fundamentals of being able to sketch out an idea very quickly by hand is still a needed skill of an architect or a designer or even a BIM manager. I've even had to do some sketches of how to approach a certain modeling concept so that it can be described to the rest of the team members. So being able to connect your ideas with your hand to draft, that's a skill. How much we hone that skill may not be as pertinent as it was 20 years ago. We now have other tools, and I would absolutely label Revit, SketchUp, Lumion, all of those programs are tools. And it doesn't matter how wonderful a tool is, if the person wielding that tool is incapable of understanding how it works, it's not going to do what you expect it to do. So I feel like architecture schools still need to invest time in teaching those technical skills. I would have to argue maybe even investing more time in those technical skills, because as far as I know, there aren't any programs for BIM. There aren't any programs for architectural rendering. They're programs for architecture. And like you were saying, you kind of pick up these other skills on the side on your own time. Why not embrace the fact that there are many paths to serving the craft of architecture, and recognize that if this thread is what you're great at, let's nurture that and make you the best renderer possible, because somebody needs that person. Let's make you the best person at Revit possible, because somebody's going to need that person. We need those people right now. But because there is not an absolute path education-wise, we are at a point where we are lacking those people that have the skills to fill those roles. And I feel like schools need to recognize that.
Great, thank you. And my second question is related to the profession. You mentioned you'd sent a letter out you know, saying that the BIM change needs to happen, and, you know, sort of throwing your hat in the ring for being the BIM manager. What actually went into sort of the nuts and bolts of transitioning into that role? Was that like a stretch position for you? And how did you have to, like, you know, negotiate changing up from your current position and all of those other elements?
I would say throughout the 10 years that I was the BIM manager, I was still kind of the pinch hitter for project teams. I would still get grabbed when there was a team that was short and needed another person to do exterior detailing. I would get pulled in for that. So I had to do a lot of time management to get both tasks done, which often meant that I was doing a lot more hours than my original 8. But I was one to get the job done any way necessary. My wife will tell you that there were many late nights of me sitting right here in this seat while everyone else was in bed. So there were a lot of steps that needed to be taken care of to get the office up and running. With the new program, we had to take care of all of the standards that were going to be applied to new projects so that they all look the same. We had to develop a library of materials and components, because basically you can't build something with nothing. So you have to have the building blocks there. We had to deal with training, which was a big hurdle. And there's constantly ongoing troubleshooting issues that take up the majority of your daytime, because once the Revit model hiccups and doesn't want to keep working, everyone has to stop. So we have to get it back online so that everyone can continue to work. So it's constantly putting out fires. So that's the general role of a BIM manager, is to keep all of those plates in the air. But I recognize that that's what was needed, and there needed to be someone at the helm that understood all of those roles, but also understood the people that were in the office and the work that we did. And all of those needed to mesh together and make sure that the office is running smoothly.
All right, so let's get to Catherine's question in the chat. She asked, what is your high school or childhood experience presented? What in your high school or childhood experience presented architecture as a career option? How did you pick UVA?
Nothing. I could go the cliche and say my Lego sets probably were the closest thing that would present architecture to me. I was looking at it more as a way of artistic expression, with the added benefit of having some of the concrete aspects of math and science. It was more about those characteristics than the actual architecture itself. And maybe that's why I struggled in undergrad, is because I didn't have something to relate it to. One of the questions in the interview was, who did you look up to as an architect that looked like me while I was in school? I couldn't answer the question. I didn't have a role model that looked like me that I looked up to. There were some professors that were there, but I didn't see them in practice. I didn't see their work. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough. Hope that changes. It has changed. I mean, we have some powerful people of color to look up to now. And how did I pick UVA? I applied to UVA, Virginia Tech, UPenn, Savannah College of Art and Design, and MIT. Out of those, UVA was the only one that gave me a big scholarship. So.
All right, Willie, you're up next.
Yeah, could you go back on your presentation one slide? I think it's one slide. Yeah. I think, and I noticed it when you went through it. And I think number 3 is really the kind of the key to diversity. I think right now people see diversity as just a quota issue. And in reality, diversity is a way to bring more iteration and a more thorough problem solving effort, because you're seeing it from a wider sort of range. And so first of all, I was wondering if that is what you were talking about. And second, do you see the industry waking up to that, or do you think it's still looking at it more as a numbers game?
Unfortunately, it is still a numbers game. I don't think there has been enough question of why we are trying to increase the numbers. I think once that question is asked, I think it'll be obvious that the why that we thought was the why really isn't the why. We are all in the business of improving people's lives through design. And if you have a homogeneous set of tools, you're going to get the same results every time. If you're trying to apply those same set of tools to every situation, at some point, those tools are going to fail you. And you need to have the right tools at the right time to solve the right problems. Once we recognize that people from different backgrounds, different upbringings, all kinds of differences, until firms recognize that that will improve the quality of their work, I'm afraid that we're still just going to be playing with numbers and statistics, and it's really meaningless, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yep.
Question, have you considered taking at UVA as perhaps an adjunct and perhaps teaching BIM?
Actually, I have, just for a small bit. I've taught 3D modeling. I covered a few different softwares at JMU for 3 or 4 semesters, and there was one semester at UVA that I did a kind of a primer course for I can't remember the professor's name that's there now that teaches BIM. Seth, I think is his first name. It's a extremely rewarding thing to do, is to teach them those basic skills. I absolutely feel like every school should have that class. I don't understand why they don't. Going back to the role of architecture schools in the future of the digital practice. But it's hard to teach the 3D program to build architecture without the students knowing how buildings go together. So you have to kind of take a holistic approach. This might be getting into changing how the architecture education system works itself. If it's all project-based, maybe, and you're using the skills that you learn to apply to the project that you're working on. I feel like that was when the magic really happened in all those classes, is when the students started to use what they were learning in my class and applying it to the studio course. That's when it started to click, and that's when they started to flourish. So why isn't that not the foundation of how that education works? if there's opportunities to teach at UVA in the future, yeah, I would consider it.
I think you have a lot to offer to the university and to the students. Certainly, BIM has become a very important part of.
I hear you, Jory.
I think I've started something here. I think the skills that you offer are not common, but are certainly necessary for what we do as architects. And I, for one, would like to share the wisdom and the knowledge that you have about BIM with us commoners who, you know, learn a whole lot and use it in our studios. I don't currently. So, calling you up and saying I need a quick webinar.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right, next up, let's have Brian Gore. His hand's been up for a little bit.
Hello.
Hello.
I want to go back to when you were talking about your college experience. Something that kind of triggered my college experience in undergrad and in grad school. And you were talking about how you things weren't working and you kind of just made the decision just to pivot and do this like thing because that thing that they were asking you to do, you just weren't going to be able to finish school within the confines of kind of the guides that they were setting or the field that they were playing. And it's something that I kind of sparked my experience in undergrad and then going to graduate school, recognizing what the game that the professors were playing and how Black students can't play that same game, but they don't realize that until like someone like me goes to grad school and understands like what the nature of an architectural education is and what it's supposed to be. There are many students when I was in grad school at Tech who were Black, who were extremely talented, but at the same time, like you look at their work and they could speak architecture, they loved architecture, but during pinups and things like that, you could see their work was lacking compared to other students, but the knowledge was there. Could you speak more into like that? Because I think part of it is that one, we don't think the same. The financial component is definitely there. We can have that conversation all day long. I think it goes back to some, like you were talking about the educational part and how one, we don't all learn the same. And then kind of like the way, like the old ways of thinking when it comes to teaching and how the universities are kind of behind at this point when it comes to kind of just teaching architecture in general. I think some of it is it being a rich white man's profession still, but I mean, in other ways too, I think some of it is professors not, I think they think that has to be taught this certain way. And if you can't learn it this way, then you can't be an architect. If you can speak more to that, it'd be great.
Yeah. You were making all the same points that I was thinking as well. Let's see, how can we approach it?
Or I think a better way to ask the question is, what would you tell the Black student in architecture school who's struggling through school, who's got like all of the knowledge and the tools, they just don't know how to use them?
Yeah. If you think about who we learn about in architecture, and if Virginia Tech is like UVA, it's like cramming modernism down your throat. That's the foundation of how they teach things like transparency, mass, form, an order. It's all through this modernist lens. And I know myself, my experiences growing up, there wasn't any modernism. The closest thing you got to architecture was going to church. That's the place that you probably felt the most space. You've probably experienced the space in church, probably the most, or in places that you were familiar with, like your home, your grandparents' home, places like that, where those spaces have a scale that we are familiar with, and it would be wonderful if that scale in that vernacular were acceptable to explore in schools today. I was reading an article today. I can't remember her name. Shoot. It's an architecture student who is doing studies in Gothic cathedrals and how the Catholic religion kind of plays into the building of the space that churches occupy. That is something very probably personal and dear to her heart. She recognizes that, she embraces it, and she is applying it to her education. Of course, it's not modernist, so I'm not exactly sure how that is playing into how well her professors are accepting the work that she does. But there needs to be a recognition that your history is part of what makes you want to be an architect, and it's going to play into how you're going to design. It needs to be, there needs to be more grace from those that are teaching architecture. There's more than just the Bauhaus. I don't know how to get them to do that, but as far as advice to the other up and coming Black architects, find a way to weave your story into the work. Again, it may not be understood as to why you're doing it, but if there is something that speaks to you and is a way to weave it into your work, that's going to make your work unique for one. It's going to make you love the work even more. It's going to make your work yours. And it doesn't matter if it's not understood. I hope that helps.
It does, yes. Thank you.
All right, Sean, you're up.
Hey, Sid.
Hey.
I just wanted to say I'm so glad you got a chance to talk to this group, and I'm so thankful that VANOMA asked you to come. I think your perspective, your path, the questions you're raising, and the points you're making are really vitally important, both for the education of architects and then the future of our profession. There's something that we talked about that I think starts to tie a lot of these things together. And it's this idea of love, this idea of meeting people where they are and getting them where they need to be, not where you want them to be. That I think your approach to clients, your approach to your ask of professors towards their students and towards people, you know, as they're working with people is really that same thing. Could you talk a little bit about the difference as you're thinking about it in that approach, you know, what an architecture that's practiced that way might look like and how it's different from what you've experienced?
Yeah, the end of that article kind of wraps that up in a nice little bow. It's putting your what's the word I want? putting your aspirations aside as an architect or as a designer and really turning to that client and listening to what they need, recognizing what they need and providing what they need. And that's it. It's not a race to solving the world's hunger problems in a design. It's solving a single problem or a small set of problems, and that's what your task is. So I do like to approach the issues that come to me in a very practical, methodical manner, recognizing that this is what the client needs. I have the tool set to recognize how to solve that need. Sure, I have tool sets to make that life better. I could, but that's not what was asked of me. So I would just do what was asked, and I'm happy, the client's happy. We all move on and we do the next project together. I don't understand how we're constantly over budget, over time, clients getting spaces that don't work for them. That's just unacceptable. It is their space. We're working for them. We are of service.
Yeah, what you're talking about to me is humility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's being humble and being a servant.
Yes.
We talked about that in our conversation, whether it came out.
Yes.
I really appreciate that perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, thank you.
All right, Ian, you're up.
Sure. That was great. Really appreciate you sharing your story. I think my favorite part about your story was like at one point in your life, you're at an institution that's not necessarily valuing your skill set. And now you're at an institution where like you might be one of the most important people on that campus. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I think that's awesome. I want to commend you for that. And I think that's very inspiring to students. So I think one thing or one thought I had, someone asked if you would consider teaching. And I want to ask, have you considered maybe providing like a workshop for VA NOMA in the future? Like, if the schools aren't willing to do it, maybe we can have some type of workshop where we get the NOMA students some basic training in BIM or other software that might be appropriate to really prepare them. I think that might be something that we can do. So.
Okay. And I want to see what I can do to help the project pipeline effort. I think those go hand in hand. Maybe they can dovetail and be part of what's being offered. Yeah, I'm open to that idea.
Awesome.
I have one more question if we can take another question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I guess just going back a little bit to your, I guess maybe bouncing off Ian's questions, but also going back to your talk about the schools. I know that I taught for a year, and it was at a school that at the time they were thinking about concentrations. And so when you talk about that, that's what I sort of jumped to, is like having schools that have more concentration, so that if someone did see themselves like not necessarily like wanting to jump into like a design path, but maybe they do want to be like on the digital side, but they still want to get an architecture degree, and sort of like how, if you've thought about that, I guess on the curriculum side, or kind of maybe you haven't necessarily gotten that much into the weeds, but I guess that was what I thought about. Was we had those discussions, but it was very difficult to at the time, this was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, to sort of like get everyone on board to like make that leap and like actually see the benefit of like being the first ones out the gate to be like, yeah, we are going to have architecture and kind of build these concentrations into our program that we see our needs. Because I think at the time, like, digital was one, but also like real estate was one. These things that we saw that students were interested in, but didn't some of them might have been doing that on their own, because we had a business school that had some real estate classes. So some of them might have pursued some of those things on their own, but actually like building it as part of the program so that students could actually see that as an option and as a plus to their architecture degree, so that when they get out, they do have these specialized things that they can build on.
Wow, that would be a terrific value. Can I ask what stopped the progress of that?
So I was only at the university for a year, and at the time, like leadership was changing. So I haven't stepped back in to see like if anything has happened along those lines. But I think that was part of it, is that, you know, some people saw it as like, yes, this is the future and this is where we need to go. And other people are like, no, we need to just stick with the standard architecture degree. And if students want to do those other things, that's fine. They can do that with their elective classes, but we don't necessarily have to like build a whole minor around it or whatever like that.
Yeah. That goes against the way that I do work. I would definitely say, okay, this is the hard thing to do. Let's buckle down and do it, because it's the right thing to do. I wonder if it was a lack of resources, staff to teach.
Yeah. All of the above.
Yeah.
But I mean, I look back now, I can hear what you're talking about, and it's definitely seeing the, you know, the proliferation of BIM and seeing that become sort of the way that a lot of people are going, and also seeing the potential of the tool, right? There's so much information. And I myself am at a university on the construction management side. And I was also thinking about, I should say that I think about our archivist and how much we depend on our archivist for information that we're looking at for past projects where we're going in to do renovation. And to be able to have a model that you could just like point to and grab information off would be a great tool to have. And we're just not there yet.
Yeah, that's the hope. I hope to have that in place for a majority of the, I'm focusing first on research spaces, historic spaces. The UVA hospital is a big client for me. And then everything else is kind of sprinkled in, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I was actually just on campus for this conference, and I hadn't been there probably in like 10 years or so. So it was interesting to see.
It's changed, hasn't it?
On the campus. Yeah. But also see like the need for like having that when, you know, where they were talking about the science buildings that were getting renovated, and thinking about like my work and all the information that we use when we're doing a renovation, and you know, how that having that model could definitely be so much more helpful to provide to like our designers and engineers that are coming in, and the contractors that are coming in behind doing work. So,
yeah, it's a big leap forward for the beginning of the project.
But yeah, definitely on the curriculum side. And I know that UVA has like a growing or changing sort of like architecture leadership as well. So I don't know if you're in discussions with them yet on the curriculum side, but definitely would say get that plug in there for that.
Okay, I'll definitely do that.
Any other questions out there? I don't see any raised hands or anything in the chat. Oh, Ken, you're muted.
Hi, I have a question. I'm so sorry.
Go
ahead.
Sasha.
Hi. One, thank you so much. This, meeting has been super inspiring as I'm finishing my 4th year here at UVA. And I definitely have seen some parallels from some of the things that you had talked about to my own experience here. As many things have changed, a couple of things haven't, and I've definitely found myself in a space where some of my other skill sets aren't as embraced, like programming, coding, and things like that. And it's really pushed me to, want to seek other professions, like along with architecture, but also looking towards professions that like specialize in things that I'm good at, like bring programming and design together as well. Of course, I want to stay in the architecture field. It's just been, I've just experienced so much pushback in the educational realm. So how did you, because your skill set can apply to, many occupations. So how were you like motivated to stay in the field of architecture in the professional realm when you were experiencing pushback in the the academic realm?
What kept me going was probably, it was little bits of pride I would have for every problem I solved. And it just kind of snowballed with more and more projects and more successes. It felt like I was in a place that I was valued, but this is all happening after employment. So you're right now in the academic realm, which, like we had discussed, it's kind of one track mind path. So if you could, I would suggest maybe finding a mentor that can help you see ways to cross-pollinate your skills, or jump out there and just start maybe start a group. Do you think you're the only one that has the skill set you have?
I probably not. So considering I've learned it from other people that have since graduated, and they've stayed in the architecture profession, but they've all said the same thing. This is a niche set of skills, and you're gonna have difficulty placing it into the architecture field or in your work, but I've done so anyways. And
I don't think you'll have difficulty for long. I think that there are going to be places you can meet people who are like-minded as you, applying their skills to architecture. You might have to go virtual to find them. I've followed many blogs. I've been to conferences that are based on technology and architecture. I have some colleagues who have gone as far as kind of stepping to the side of architecture, but still keeping their one foot in it by getting into things like robotics and manufacturing, so that it's not completely different skill set, but you're still using the skills that you learned, and you're still applying your skills to the world of architecture. So that might be a path to consider in the future. But please keep in touch with me. I would love to keep following you and your path. For everyone else, I spoke with Sasha at our open house for Virginia NOMA when they came to Charlottesville, and she's absolutely one of the unicorns. So keep an eye on her.
And I know there's also professors at other universities that are kind of more like-minded with you, Sasha. Someone who comes to mind for me is a gentleman called Nathan King, who has really pushed himself. Well, he has a vast sort of knowledge and experience in general, but he's really started to push this idea of technology and how it integrates into architecture. And he actually is employed with Autodesk as well as part of that endeavor. And I forget if they call it like Autodesk University or something like that, but he's heavily handed in that.
thank you so much.
You have one more hand raised.
Yeah, it looks like it's Rama.
It's me again. Sorry. I wanted to say, sort of for Sasha's benefit, that I feel like whoever told you that there's no market for your skills is heavily misinformed. I just think that they don't know the correct places to look, and that's something completely different. I have people who I've worked with in my previous offices who, they would spend a lot of time in the office doing their own research work, which was fine with the company. Like, the company would actually pay for additional monitors, additional software for them to learn so they could use it as part of the company's R&D funds. And also, they're still with the company, but the company has paid for them to go to South Africa, get an additional degree in this type of digital work that they're doing. And they do all this stuff with Grasshopper. and several other programs in sustainable technology and design. And they've actually built houses in South Africa using that technology. And it's been a really great project to watch, but that's just one small example of the different things. Because one, obviously, offices love to be at the forefront. Every office wants to be seen as an industry leader in technology. Within my company, Jacobs, we have an entire innovation department, and they have digital courses you could take on being an innovator within your career or within your job. And I think that will be happening more and more as clients will be demanding a more integrated approach to architecture with the BIM technology and the kind of information they can get. They'll be demanding it, and they'll need people who can both do the BIM and troubleshoot the BIM from the tech side. When stuff isn't working at all, nobody in the office can figure it out. They'll need people to help get through that. And of course, that's leaving aside the entire digital realm of people not building physical buildings, people like video game designers, things like that, where they still need buildings even if they're not being built. You know, so I feel like it's very much about finding those resources that can help you find the actual career that will work for you, because maybe that job doesn't exist yet, but it will by the time you graduate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. That's really comforting to hear. I'm just inspired by everything that was said today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
A few more minutes for for announcements.
Yeah. Kelly, do you want to talk about our program tomorrow?
Yes, let me try to pull up. Got a million things on my screen right now. Are y'all able to see PowerPoint?
Yes, I see the screen with.
All right.
Yep.
So again, thank you, Sid, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to meet you recently at our open house in Charlottesville and to make this connection and kind of bring you to the wider audience of our VANOMA membership. And with that in mind, wanted to let everybody know about an event that's happening tomorrow, which is with the University of Virginia's NOMA chapter. We're doing a student portfolio and resume review. And this is open to all professionals to join in and provide your insights to help these folks build and help them build these portfolios and learn how to, communicate what it is they're learning, but also about themselves out to the world. And so if you'd like to join tomorrow, you can find more info on our website at vanoma.org/events, where you can get all the Zoom login information. And again, to reach out to us via NOMA, you can find us on the web and various things. I need to also add to this list, we have started a YouTube channel. It has Bert's presentation from last month, and it will have Sidney's from this evening. So be on the lookout for that. And again, events like this would not be possible without our awesome and amazing sponsors. So again, thank you to everyone who contributes to the great work that we're doing. And that's all I had. Kim, do you have any parting words?
No, just to echo what you said. Thanks to everyone for joining us this evening, and especially to Sidney Griffin for being our spotlight this month. Please stay tuned and look out for future announcements about some of the programs that VANOMA is putting on. Some of them involve our NOMA students and interaction with them, and others involve ARE study groups, for example, and programs for professionals. So just stay tuned, and hopefully you're on our mailing list. But most of the things that we'll be doing will be on our website. So make sure that you stay in touch with that. And with that,
And,
Yeah.
and Sid alluded to this a few times throughout his presentation about Project Pipeline. And for those unfamiliar, that's a summer camp that NOMA across, all the chapters across the US host each summer. And it's a 5-day camp for us here in Virginia. And we're starting that planning process. So if you'd like to be a part of that, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us. I just put our email in the chat. And we will be doing some additional recruiting efforts in the next few weeks, but we're just starting to hit the ground running. But if you want to get in on the ground floor to start this year's program, feel free to reach out.
Oh, parting question, Sidney.
Mhm.
Are you related to Dina Griffin?
I don't know, maybe.
If you don't know her, she's a dynamite architect. I had the pleasure of working with her on the NOMA board many years ago, but she is really taking off. I think she's designing Barack Obama's museum.
Oh, wow.
So, and I think she's in the latest issue of what magazine is it? Architectural Record, I think. But
Awesome.
lovely lady and extremely talented. So I saw Dana Griffin here. I thought that might have been
That's my wife.
So hi, Dana. Always good to have support there.
Yes.
All right. So with that, I guess we will call it an evening. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning in and showing up and showing out and all that other good stuff. So we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.